Hi, I'm Camp Mayor Dana Ralph, and today I'm joined by Chief Rafael Padilla. We're going to talk a little bit about the legislative session. It was a rough session, very long, and we had a lot of ups and downs, especially when it came to public safety conversations. We did have some wins, and we had some almost wins, and then we have some things that we're pretty concerned about. So wanted to take a few minutes to share with you sort of the work that we've done. As you will see, there's a theme that carried through this session. Your team here at Kent was working on these things 7 days a week, what felt like 24 hours a day. Chief, you and I had a lot of late night conversations, Saturday and Sunday conversations. All of the members of our team were weighing in and providing feedback on proposed legislation. So let's start. Let's just jump right in and let's talk about the win first. We had a pretty incredible win this session.
Right. So we were able to really get momentum behind the illegal street racing bill. A lot of work from some experts, and for better or worse, we've become really attuned to addressing that issue. It's prevalent. It's been prevalent for years. We have a subject matter expert in the region, Commander Josh Bava. Our prosecutors are outstanding, and so we are able to present information that made it through pretty unilaterally, and collaboratively, I guess is the word, is what we're looking at. But so the bill allows some new things that are much needed. The first issue was with jurisdiction. One of the challenges with prosecuting these cases, a lot of the organizers of these events do them from computers outside the county, outside the city. And so there's a jurisdictional issue in terms of when we do make cases, put them together, who has jurisdiction and all that. This law clarifies it. So we get an opportunity to either address the issue where the crime created, so wherever they use the computer to put together the event, or where we catch them doing the act. This streamlines things for the prosecutor, makes it clear, and it really helps us impact the organizers of the crime. These are put on by people on social media through cyber format, and they can literally call hundreds of people to an event, as we've seen in Takeover. So that was a big deal. Jurisdiction got settled. The other components that are helpful to law enforcement is the ability to continue to impound the vehicles. Without the ability to impound vehicles, what we were seeing is we would make arrests of someone doing illegal street racing on a Friday. They would get released within a few hours of that. And then by Saturday, they'd come back in the same vehicle to continue racing. So we were just kind of chasing our tail with these things. Like a
revolving door.
Yeah, absolutely. So this allows us to impound the vehicles, and that's going to be at the violator's expense. So that's helpful to us. Another thing, and this was particularly important to me because I think it really may help deter some of these races, is that upon a second conviction for illegal street racing, the state or the city will be able to seize the vehicle and forfeit it, which means they will lose their car. Yeah. And we hope it doesn't get to that. We hope we don't have repeat offenders, but we already know that we do. So these will be helpful. It doesn't fix all of the issues with illegal street racing. There's still some complications with the venues, but we're working on everything from engineering and traffic design, coordinated efforts on investigations throughout the region, and then awareness and education through our traffic safety program.
I do want to highlight, I've had conversations with folks about, like, I used to street race when I was a kid. I don't really know what the big deal is. At the risk of sounding like I've gotten really old, back in my day, it was different, and I hear that repeatedly. Can you talk just briefly about some of the things that we're seeing in conjunction with the street racing? It's not just about whose car can go faster.
Correct. One of the provisions in this law addresses what we call off-street racing, or what is commonly known as drifting. And if you've seen probably many of the TV news broadcasts that show these races, and both the people attending and the racers themselves are in jeopardy of serious physical harm or danger. The other part that's not commonly known with these events is that they do breed other crimes. Just last week in a nearby city, there were 2 people shot at a racing event. We've had homicides, we've had robberies, we've had illegal gambling, we've had shootings. There are a lot of related crimes that come with these events, and so it's not just kids having fun. The other thing that was very disturbing this last couple of years is that they started to go after officers responding. So an officer would drive in, the group would surround them, pound on the car, put the officer in jeopardy. So just a blatant disregard for the law, along with the historic property damage and all the other things that come with it.
Yeah, I think what's been disturbing to a lot of people is what used to be an activity that occurred just on those long straightaways in our industrial area. There's intersection takeovers in the middle of neighborhoods.
Yes.
And that's a scary thing. So want to say thank you to Commander Bava for all of the amazing work that he did and for the legislature for supporting this bill. We really do think it's another tool to help us in combating all of those kinds of activities. So there's our win.
There's our win.
Let's talk about what we could put in the category of sort of middle of the ground. We made some progress, but it's nowhere near what it needs to be to sort of restore some of that safety. And that's around pursuits. Walk us through what we used to be able to pursue for, then this interim period of all the things we couldn't pursue for, moving on to the changes, and then what we would like to see happening next session.
So we'll start with prior to 2021. The law prior to 2021 allowed law enforcement officers to pursue for any crimes, basically, and most infractions. Now, while that was the law, and we could have discussions about where restrictions should be on that, most departments had very strict pursuit policies. Pursuits are recognized by everybody, including law enforcement, that there are dangers that come with them, and we want to be very careful. Most departments, like Kent, had policies that governed when a pursuit could occur, where it could occur, whether it was authorized by a supervisor. And a lot of safeguards built in. And in addition to the risk of injury or death to people, including the officer, it's a high liability for civil lawsuits. So there were a lot of things already in place governing pursuits. And the reality is that while these sometimes did have unintended outcomes with bystanders, the vast majority of the pursuits were being conducted in a reasonably safe fashion. So in 2021, that changed. And the first thing that happened was the threshold of evidence needed to conduct a pursuit moved from reasonable suspicion to probable cause. And as we talked about in prior videos and whatnot, that is a significant change. Yeah. It's not just words. It is the difference literally in reducing probably 90% of the opportunities an officer would have to engage a violent criminal. Say someone leaving the scene of a drive-by shooting. For instance, in essence, it went from the officer being required to have reasonable facts that would lead a reasonable person to believe that a crime was being committed, so they had the authority to stop them. It moved from that all the way up to they had to have sufficient evidence, probable cause, to arrest someone. And as we know, officers don't instantaneously get all the information about what's going on. And so once the criminals out there committing these crimes learned that we could not pursue, it was game on.
Messaging, I think, is one of the things that we talked about when we were testifying a lot, that when you open this up and essentially tell the bad guy, as long as you get to that car, not a lot's going to happen, that really changed the behavior of criminals in our state.
Absolutely. Most of our burglaries prior to the change in the law, people would break a door, break a window, and go in. And what we're seeing now more and more is people are using trucks to smash into
Stolen trucks
to smash into buildings because they know as long as they're in a vehicle, even if I watch someone smash a truck into a building and steal stuff, they get in that vehicle and take off. I can't pursue. Because the other major change in 2021 is it limited the law of pursuable crimes to crimes that were defined as violent crimes for the statute. And it's not what people think it is. Right. It was missing domestic violence. It doesn't address any of the major crimes like burglaries, residential burglaries, vehicle thefts, and what.
Crashing through a building with a vehicle feels fairly violent to me, but it doesn't qualify.
It doesn't qualify under the law. But that was the old law. And so we had an opportunity to see some changes.
So the changes that were made this session were the ability to go back to reasonable suspicion, but only for violent crimes, correct?
With the addition of some additional crimes like domestic assault, which I think is
a good add. Yeah.
Yeah, it should have been in there all the time. I think the legislators realized we want to get that back in, and they did.
what's one of the notable things that didn't change?
What didn't change is the ability to address those, quote, nonviolent crimes in our society. We're still in a situation, in fact, we have a video of one of our officers on patrol that we want to show that I think clearly demonstrates what happens not once in a while. This is happening every day, and sometimes several times a day, where officers are not able to intervene with people in stolen cars or who just committed shoplifting or burglary, and it's a big deal.
All right, let's take a look at the video.
I do not have eyes on it.
Was that southbound Central at 628?
Hey, firm.
Copy. 1411, I have that on a Sunday Tucson. What color was that?
Dark gray, I believe. There it is. 1411, I got it at Central and Smith. Waiting at the red light, southbound.
Southbound Central, sir.
Oh, they're already taking off. And they got in the lane to turn eastbound on Smith.
Eastbound Smith.
Fort King 11, attempt traffic, and he's fleeing. And I'm not in pursuit. They are eastbound up Smith, high rate of speed.
Not in pursuit. Well, can eastbound up Smith every speed.
And they just turned south on Titus. Looked like a white male, younger driver.
Copy.
And last seen up the hill on Reed, and I'm no longer following. Okay, so that was a stolen vehicle in front of us, and had the broken out window, all the typical signs of a stolen Hyundai. I mean, based on the broken window, and as soon as I drove by, he looked right directly at my patrol car and switched lanes. And then as soon as the light turned green, he started to flee, which obviously shows me knowledge that that vehicle was stolen. However, possession of stolen vehicle does not fall under the current crimes that we can pursue for, so I just had to let it go. Which he knew. I mean, it was clear. He even slowed down a bit once I stopped chasing him. He continued driving away, but he, like a normal day, just kind of driving away, not going to participate in the traffic stop, so he went elsewhere. So, yeah.
All right, Chief. So I feel like what we just saw is hard for people to understand. It's hard for me to understand. So I just want to walk through. Officer identifies the stolen vehicle, whether we run the plate, we have the, we've got the information out to be looking for a stolen vehicle. Officer sees the stolen vehicle, attempts to stop somebody, and if that person drives off, we just have to pull over and be done and watch that stolen vehicle go away.
That is correct. And getting that message out, because we will follow the law. We will respect the law. We will follow the law. The challenge for you and I is when that victim expects us to do something and we literally say we can't, there's a huge disconnect there. And I do wonder if that perspective is being heard enough, because we certainly hear it at the local level.
I think we've got a lot of data on the significant increase in auto theft in Washington State, how we are the highest in the country when it comes to auto theft. And I will tell you, what I am hearing from residents is a frustration, because a lot of this is around, well, no piece of property is worth a life. Well, I think one of the things we need to really be clear about is that we didn't pursue every stolen vehicle before. All of those things that you talked about, there's process, there's policy, there's procedure, all of those things are taken into account. But the difference is the message was to the bad guy, I might get chased. Something might happen to me. And now we have a message of, as long as I get in that vehicle, even if you watch somebody break into a car and drive away, you can't stop them.
Correct.
And they know that. So I think that's the, like you said, we've been seeing every morning when I turn the news on, there's another truck that's backed into another store in a strip mall to steal an ATM or whatever. 9 times out of 10, those are stolen vehicles. So even on the detective side of this, if you've got a suspect that's in a stolen vehicle that's done this, it makes it that much harder because then they leave that one and steal another one.
It's exponentially more difficult to solve and be able to bring a case to prosecution when you have to do it after the fact, looking for video and leads and talking to people. Whereas if there's a reasonably safe opportunity to intervene right there, it makes it a lot easier to get to who's actually committing the crime.
So just as a recap, we had the law change in 2021. This session, we made some progress. We got the change in reasonable suspicion for violent crimes and the addition of some crimes like domestic violence.
Correct.
So that's good news, but we will be back,
Absolutely.
right? We know that there's still changes that need to be made to keep our community safe.
I believe so. And we will continue to have the conversation and engage as we should on behalf of the community.
So, and again, thank you for the multiple trips to Olympia, both in person and on Zoom to highlight these concerns on behalf of our community. All right, so let's move on to the next one, which is, I think, more of a struggle. Less progress or no progress, and we've got some concerns, and that's really around Blake, around possession and use of controlled substances. So you all have heard me talk about this a lot. We have pretty significant concerns here in the city of Kent with the de facto legalization of things like fentanyl, methamphetamine, heroin. It's not a good thing for our community. It's not good for those folks that are being that are deep in addiction, and it's not good for the people that are victims of the crimes that come along with possession. So we spent a lot of time talking about this just to sort of set it up. The Blake decision occurred. Supreme Court said that it was not constitutional to prosecute someone for a crime they didn't know they were committing. So the legislature had a choice. A year ago, they could have inserted that word knowing. They did not. They opened it back up and really decided to change the way that we handle drug possession. Went from a felony to a misdemeanor, bringing it down. Now the responsibility of both our police officers and our court. We worked really hard pre-session to educate our legislators on what it meant to impose these laws on the ground and what it looked like to give people that path to treatment. And we started out with a bill. Senator June Robinson had a bill that I think felt like it met a lot of our needs. Right. Not perfect, but really workable.
I think so.
As session went on, what happened?
Yeah, so we got, the legislature was not successful in passing any legislation. The concern with that is, as of July 1st, the current law, which was ineffective, we can talk about that a little bit, will expire. And that means that the state Supreme Court ruling on the Blake decision becomes the guiding law, if you will, case law, and that means we cannot arrest anybody for possession of drugs. That is a de facto, drugs are legal in the state. And you've got to ask the question why. I know that most families in some way or form are affected by someone who has a substance use disorder and addiction issues. And in King County alone, 2 people die every day from fentanyl overdose. My officers are out there, our corrections officers and firefighters. We are responding to overdoses daily. And a lot of times we can save lives, but a lot of times we can't. And for something so lethal to become just, it's okay, I don't think that's what our community wants. I don't think most people want that. At the same time, we know that the answer isn't incarceration. Right. And that's why I'm pretty proud of the legislation you proposed and the council passed. I think it's a good balance of each.
Yeah, so that's without the legislature acting before session ended and the sunset of the Blake fix, it left us in cities all across the state without any laws surrounding drug possession. So worked very closely with you, with our city attorney to come up with some legislation that was, like you said, is that middle ground. We want people to have multiple opportunities to seek treatment. And if they're choosing not to seek treatment, then the teeth or the penalty is potential jail time. It still remains a gross misdemeanor. does not elevate to that felony level, but there is opportunity for those charges to be vacated and come off of somebody's record.
I think the principal difference with our approach and what's in the current law that's going to expire in July is that the current law relies on voluntary compliance. So if a person chooses to go into treatment and get help, then that path is available. I think we have good substantial. We've tried it for a good long time now. And what we thought or concerned about in 2021 has come true. These powerfully addictive drugs cannot be things where people just wake up and say, I'm going to quit fentanyl today.
Yeah.
They are too powerful. They're too strong. Additional to that, when someone comes off of those drugs, you need medical care with them because it's dangerous and then when they withdraw. And so this notion that they will voluntarily get help is not a reality. If they could, more people would be doing it, and it's not happening. Our process kind of compels that opportunity with some really safe off-ramps for somebody that gets through treatment and does their good faith effort to come off of the drugs. And the public interest in that is obvious. The crime rates, the impact, you look around our city, the prevalence of cartels in Washington is huge. And so there is a strong public interest in this and public responsibility.
We've talked a lot about sort of what the opportunities our officer sees someone engaging in or in possession or use of a controlled substance, and you have the opportunity to take them into custodial care.
Correct.
Right? So what's the next step?
So if our officer encounters someone and they have that, we now have the authority under city code to make a physical arrest. From there, the person goes into the system and the prosecution is immediately deferred. It's not even a question. So we immediately defer the prosecution for 2 years and refer the patient, if you will, it's a medical situation, to treatment. If within 24 months they complete the treatment and or don't have additional violations, then the court will not prosecute.
So they've never been prosecuted for the crime.
Their record will not show that they've even been arrested. It'll all be expunged. If for some reason within the 24 months of the deferred prosecution they violate the terms of the deferral and they end up being convicted, they have a second opportunity. So then the courts can defer sentencing for 24 months and place them back in the treatment and give them an additional 24 months to get through. And we know that this can be a lifelong journey for some people, right? So we want to give a lot of grace and opportunity. If they complete the treatment, then the sentence is removed and the prosecution is removed and the record is expunged. It really is a balance of accountability, but really bringing services in a way that may actually work. Again, relying on people that just opt out of using these powerful drugs.
It's not realistic. No. It's just not realistic. There's places for someone to change their mind along the way. If they choose initially to go through the court process and then at any one of these points say, you know what, I really would like to try treatment, they have that option as well. And I think that that's important. So multiple off-ramps. The governor has called a special session starting May 16th. So the legislature will reconvene to talk about Blake and only Blake. My ask, and if you feel so inclined to reach out to your legislators, please do. We've built a roadmap. Kent has designed what I think is an extremely fair, compassionate ordinance that is workable for our officers. It's workable for the court system, and most importantly, workable for the person that has the substance abuse disorder. Our big fear is that we have put this in place. It will go into effect in Kent July 1. And if the legislature takes action that preempts us or says to a city, you are not allowed to have a law like this, that it will be something that's watered down, not as workable, not practical, and really not be as successful at getting people into treatment. So our hope is that the legislature takes a look at what the work that we've done and the thoughtfulness of this ordinance and really patterns whatever they do after this, or allows a city to, even if they set a baseline and not preempt us from doing the things we know are going to make a difference. I think that's the big thing when it comes to Blake. All right, we're getting close to the end. The last thing I want to talk about, and this is a bill that you and I went to Olympia, sat in a hearing room for a couple of hours, waiting to testify, and it was around funding. So it's been in the news. I've watched you on the news quite a bit in the last few days talking about Kent's successes in being fully staffed. Always with the caution that we are fully staffed up to the budget that we have.
Correct.
Right? We are nowhere near fully staffed when it comes to the number of officers we need for a size of city that we are. And that's something that you and I have been talking about now for 6 years. Let's talk about a little bit about the bill that we went and testified on and where we ended up.
Yeah, so we were supportive of a bill that would allow municipalities and counties to get a sales tax credit.
Not a new tax.
Not a new tax. Using existing tax revenue for the sole purpose of hiring police officers. And for Kent specifically, that money would have plussed us up somewhere in the ballpark of 20 to 25 officers overnight. It's an interesting discussion in that cities, as you know, are having to look at taking the expense, which is very expensive, of public safety out of the general fund. And you see that in other parts of government, critical infrastructure such as roads and streets and fire departments and schools all have dedicated pots of money. It is an opportunity to say we recognize that public safety is a paramount duty of government, and we are going to assist these cities in making sure there's dedicated funding, not new taxes, just using the taxes that exist that would elevate us. And so why is that important? Washington is dead last. We are dead last in the country in terms of per capita staffing. There are less officers per residents than all 50 states and the District of Columbia. We have been in that position for almost a decade. And at the same time, you see that while some of the crime trends across the country with homicides and shootings and stolen cars are flattening or going down, Washington continues to go in the wrong direction. So part of the crime issue, one of the many facets to solving what's going on right now, is we don't have enough police officers. And so I guess we're going back to the drawing board next year.
Yeah, we're going to have to continue to ask the legislature, find fixes here within the city. We both got an email today from a gentleman who has moved to Kent 4 years ago. And I was really impressed. He broke it down and did the math, the per capita staffing that we have in the city of Kent and in surrounding cities versus what is happening in other states. And we're less than half.
Correct.
So it also, I think the irony all of this is that we've spent a lot of time talking about how we need our police department to develop trust with the neighborhood, with our community, be a part of the community, be a part of the fabric of who we are. But if we don't have enough officers to answer just those basic 911 calls, we don't have the opportunity to be at the community event or reading stories or doing all of those things that build that trust. And that's a hard part for me.
Absolutely.
That it feels counter to what we all want, what our residents want. And it means that we're not doing that proactive policing. So when we sit down with a business owner and they say, I'd love it if I could just have an extra patrol, we don't have the bodies to do that.
Correct.
So we will be back to the legislature again next year asking for this fix and continuing talking internally on, what our options are. But it definitely is something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. All in all, it was a pretty rough session filled with ups and downs. We thought we were making progress. Some places we did, some places we didn't. Want to say thank you to you and your department for continuing to weigh in and being an active part of the conversation. If we don't show up for these conversations and just sit back and let things happen to us, it's never a good thing. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for your proactiveness on that front. So stay tuned, more to come on the Blake decision and more to come on funding for our police department. They're both very, very important conversations. And then also on pursuits. I think that's the other piece.
Yes.
So
Pursuits.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for joining us and stay tuned for more information.